Hello and welcome, I'm DrHamfist, and in this video I'm going to be explaining the Sorcerer class in Heroes of Hammerwatch. So if you just poured in a fresh Sorcerer, you have two abilities. You've got Little Icicle and Big Icicle. That's basically what I like to call them. The left click here, it can bounce off walls, and it can even bounce off enemies. I think it can hit 2 enemies when it's at rank 1, and then as you improve it, it can actually bounce off quite a few. And then this large Icicle, you drop it, it hits everything in an area, it will stun things briefly, I think it's like freezes them. But it also, weirdly, it splits the amount of damage it deals across all the enemies. So if you hit a big pile of things with it, you're really getting a large stun, but almost no damage on them. Whereas if you hit only one guy, it does a lot of damage, but you're only stunning one guy. That actually makes it a decent tool against bosses. And then your left click, it's just a decent damage, but is very, very hard to hit things with. They actually recently patched the game to make it a little bit easier, and it's still a little bit annoying to hit things with this left click. So left click here, you can get 2 enemies at a time with it. That's the nice thing about it. But if I was, say, being swarmed by only bats, it can be a little bit tough hitting them. Oh, I'm getting caught right here. Whereas the right click, it's super easy to hit stuff with it, and it does 30 damage there, you see. If I try to drop it here, though, it does like 6 to all those guys, right? So the more stuff you hit with it, the less it does. There, I got it to hit like only 3 damage. I'm also like almost dead here. Let's take a look at their skill tree. All right, we're safe. I get a little spoiled / lazy playing my high level tunes, and then every time I go back to a level 1, I kind of panic. But so the first 2 skills we did take a look at, just to explain them a little bit more. Frost Shard, when you upgrade it, it can actually ricochet off more enemies. So when you upgrade that, you can eventually hit a very large pile of enemies and do a decent amount of damage in an area. And then Comet, skill 2, it does more damage when you upgrade it, and that's it. And since the damage is split, it's never going to be great into piles of enemies. So if you upgrade it, it does a better job at like single target damage, but that's all it ever really gets better at. The stun doesn't go up or anything. Maybe the area, maybe? I'm unsure about that, because I haven't upgraded it, obviously. But getting into the first unlockable skill, this is where the Sorc starts to turn a corner. So Frost Nova. Unleash 13 Frost Shards in all directions around the Sorcerer, dealing 12 hybrid damage. And hybrid just means half magical, half physical. This is a great skill. When you upgrade it, you'll get more Frost Shards, and they'll deal more damage. And part of the reason this skill is so great is because of passive later, so we're going to get to that in just a minute. But this is a great skill by itself. These shards will bounce off of walls and seek people out after they bounce off walls, so you generally want to be doing this near a lot of enemies and also near a wall on one side of you to sort of reflect both halves of the circle at them. Orb of Winter. You throw out this orb that basically almost just casts Frost Novas itself. It sort of spews them out like randomly, and it just deals a ton of damage all around it, and I believe it'll bounce off walls too, the orb itself. But this will do a lot of damage, and it'll do damage in an area, but it also is decent damage into like a boss if you're just trying to crank a ton of damage on one thing. Now into the passives. So my least favorite passive, as you should be able to tell, Biting Chill. Slows enemies hit by the Sorcerer. I think skills does encompass the primary attack, so it's probably everything the Sorcerer does by 20%. You usually don't really have an issue of running away from things as the Sorcerer. You don't really have to like stand and fight them, so I don't know why you'd necessarily need to slow them. It lasts longer and slows for a greater amount the more you upgrade this skill. Not a huge fan of it, but it's thematic if you want to be slowing stuff with your frost spells. Ice Barrier, I do actually like this one. It gives you a percentage chance to take half damage, and then also it will apply Biting Chill if you have that. I don't, but it gives you like basically more toughness. And as you increase it, it gives you a much higher chance of taking half damage, up to at the final rank 60% chance to take half damage. So more often than not, you just take half damage. And you know, if you do the math, you take 30% less damage total when you upgrade this. So it's like a 30% damage reduction, which is nice. And then the absolute magnum opus of the Sorcerer, Shatter. So Shatter is why you would play a Sorcerer in the first place. Once you have Shatter, whenever you kill an enemy, and I believe it does have to be the Sorcerer, if you're playing in teams, it has to be you, but when you kill an enemy, there is a 10% chance that it will trigger a Frost Nova at its location. So that uses your Frost Nova and the rank in Frost Nova you have. So when you upgrade Frost Nova here, it makes it cost more mana, but when you get one off Shatter, it's free. It does not cost you any mana. So having a better version of Frost Nova does improve Shatter. So my advice is absolutely max Frost Nova so that when you later get Shatter, it's better. And then when you get to Shatter skill 2, it just doubles the chance. And this is when you'll see it start to kill entire rooms. It can happen on a really, really dense pile with Shatter 1, but with Shatter 2, when like 1 out of 5 enemies that dies procs this, you'll just start to knock over huge piles of things. And that's just when it's really way, way better. So let's take a look at all of these skills when you have a fully upgraded Sorcerer out in dungeon. Alright, so we are back in the dungeon, this time on New Game Plus within a very well upgraded Sorcerer. I don't know why I said fully upgraded, I don't have every single skill point, but we got a big pile of enemies up above us. We're about to fight them in a second, but just before then, the 2 skills we haven't seen yet. So first is the Frost Nova. It's going to send out a bunch of small shards of ice, and it does do it in a circle, but you'll get the most mileage out of it if you do it up against a wall, because it's going to reflect all of the ones that bounce off of that wall. Just to show you, if I do it in this this little alleyway here, you see how they sort of bounce around? Everything that bounces off the wall is just more damage in that direction, so you basically get double the value if you're up against a wall when you cast it. Or if you're totally surrounded by enemies, it's fine to shoot it in any direction. So that too. And then the other skill, the Orb of Winter. You drop this orb, it slowly moves forward. This orb itself bounces off walls, but the missiles it shoots out don't. So it's actually fine to just put this out in the middle of the map somewhere, where it can just tag a bunch of things. And the passive, Shatter, I'm about to show you guys. So I'm going to walk in here, and I'm not even going to activate. You'll see, like, if I activate the Frost Nova, it does that little, like, click right there. I'm just going to left click at people. And at some point, one of them is going to explode from the Shatter passive and hopefully set off a huge chain reaction and just kill most of the stuff. And I won't have to spend any mana to do it. So let's go find this big pile of things up here. See if I can't sneak up on them. Yeah, right here. Something. There we go. Yes. All right. So there's a pretty big detonation. And then maybe get some more. There's some more. All right. That's most of them. Yeah, and then also, this is New Game Plus, so this lurker thing here. There we go. Yeah, Acacia does this really crazy shot. Yeah, and then even on stuff like this, if he's near a wall, if you do Frost Nova here, if I don't have a target, they just bounce wildly. But if it hits a wall, it will target something. So you can get half of the Frost Nova to go right for it. And then obviously, once you got Orb of Winter, the actual way that you probably want to clear this room is just throw a... oh, sorry, pulled up the map instead. Just throw a big orb in here. And that will actually kill everything and set off chain reactions and just go totally crazy. So that's what you're going to be doing to clear like big packs of enemies. The one thing about the Sorcerer endgame, Shatter doesn't really help you kill bosses at all. Killing bosses is a bit of a nightmare. Boo! If it's a boss that you can get near a wall, I think Frost Nova is definitely the best way to do it, because everything that bounces will actually go target them. But if it's something that's not near a wall, like the Act 2 boss, you're just sort of out on a platform with no walls near it except for on like the top and bottom of the stage. So it's a little tough to get that guy near a wall and actually use that. It's pretty awkward to kill him. You kind of just have to left click him a ton, and you're going to run out of mana with whatever you choose to do, and it won't do too much damage. So that's sort of the Achilles heel of the Sorcerer, is like going through the game normally. You start to run this corner where Shatter starts to just clear everything for you, except for bosses. And then when you try to push into high levels of New Game Plus, Shatter only really works when you are killing things. And in New Game Plus, stuff has so much health that later stages of the game, it's kind of hard to set off those chain reactions, because one thing will shatter and then, like, you know, apply a Frost Nova, but everything else can just absorb it and not die. So that becomes a little bit awkward. But let's go check out the blessing paths and see what I would recommend there. All right, so here, just briefly, playing as the Sorcerer, I chose to go for Path of the Magician for the 20% skill damage, then into Blessing of Mind for plus mana regen, and Symbol of Wisdom, which reduces the cost of your skills. I did this for the same build on the Warlock. Both of them I've done this way. I forgot to mention on the Warlock. The point of this is to have more mana to spam more so that you can kill bosses. Because like I said, the Sorcerer sucks at bosses. If you just wanted to go kill rooms quickly, and maybe you're playing in a party and somebody else is really good at killing bosses, like I think the Thief is very decent at that, Path of the Magician, then into Blessing of Intellect, which also makes you do more damage, then into Symbol of Focus, which also makes you do more damage. I'd kind of recommend against this in part though, because the Frost Nova, I think it does hybrid damage, and reducing your enemy's resistance only increases half of the damage of the Frost Novas. So that's kind of one of the catches with this, which is why I went into the mana build here. I think this is a pretty good build for any caster, at least if you're trying to push high levels of New Game Plus and you're going to be spamming a ton of skills. That is the Sorcerer at just a super high level. One thing to note, the title bonus on a Sorcerer is probably the best of any character in the game. The title bonus on Sorcerer is plus mana regen to all heroes, so it's absolutely a great one to do for that reason. And you probably would want to make a Sorcerer as an alt character at some point, even if they aren't your main, just for that reason alone. Beyond the fact that they're super fun, I think they might be my favorite class, just building these huge piles of enemies and then knocking them all down. The only reason I hate playing a Sorcerer is trying to kill the bosses with it. But hope that gave you a pretty good idea how they work. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you around.